Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Why so serious?
Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for July 18th, 2024. I am Brendan Cassidy, and on tonight's movie review, we have a twist. We have a twist here. Sadly, that was a joke I was potentially saving for M. Night Shyamalan's Trap later this year. But for a movie title like Twisters, I just had to jump the gun. But here's the twist. Joining me on this episode is the executive editor and podcast host over at Awards Watch, but most importantly, In Session Film alum, Ryan McQuade. Ryan, it's good to have you back.
It's about to get twisted in here.
Oh man, I'm so disappointed. I set you up perfectly for you to reply to that statement by saying, "I'm not back."
Oh, I'm not back. There you go. How about that?
Do your best.
JD,
Bill
edited in
impression.
post. Edited in the post. Let's go. Wait, are we talking about Trap tonight?
Oh, I wish. I'm looking
Man,
forward to that. They played the trailer for Trap in front of Twisters in the theater when I saw it, and I'm seeing that trailer in a theater makes me even more pumped for it.
I'm telling you this. As the biggest long-time standing M. Night Shyamalan fan of the In Session Film fandom, I am so pumped. I'm so pumped to see this movie, because if anything is more of a big concept than this movie, I don't know what is. This sounds kind of insane. He's also said, like, not to go on a tangent about Trap, but he's talked about how he wrote that script the fastest he's ever written a script. And
yeah, like 5.5 months, and I think
Yeah.
Signs was his second to shortest now at 6 months.
Yeah. So when
when
he was putting Signs in the same sentence with Trap, I'm like, oh, let's ride.
you got
Let's
me.
go.
You got me.
Because that's his
Have
best
you-
movie.
Did you
Yeah.
hear about his pitch for Trap? I guess that when he went to the pitch room to say the movie he wanted to make, I think he said something like, "What if the Silence of the Lambs took place at a Taylor Swift concert?" And everyone's like, "Yep, make it. Just make it."
That pitch is already better than Long Legs. So there you go.
We are not here to talk about long legs. We have more to talk about when we get twisted on this episode. But first off, Ryan, thank you so much for being here. We love the work that you're doing over at Awards Watch right now. You and Jay Leb are you're in the middle of a Tony Scott director series, which
Yes.
has honestly been a blast to listen to. There's a particular upcoming episode I'm very excited for obvious reasons. I won't reveal that here. But the episodes that you've released thus far have been really great, showcasing just how great of a director Tony Scott really is. We really don't talk about him enough.
I mean, I would have loved to see what Tony Scott could have done with Twisters, because it kind of feels like a movie that is desperately needing him.
Needing more of a
he's-
90s energy.
He's like one of the greatest directors of all time. Like, I think that's what we've kind of established and kind of figured out, is that, like, his filmography is so consistent and so unique and has so much heart. And that's what Brendan, you and I love about, I think, the late 90s, early 2000s, like movies that we saw a lot when we were kids.
Yeah.
These kind of movies that we would pull off the shelves at Blockbuster. And he's the best. And we had JD on for the Top Gun episode. That was great.
Yeah.
We just had Dave on for Man on Fire, which was a wonderful episode. We might have somebody, we can just say it, we're gonna have Brendan on for the Deja Vu episode. We may have already recorded it, because we like to record things in advance. It's a fantastic episode. It comes out in 2 weeks. I highly recommend everybody go and listen to it on the Awards Watch podcast feed. I've absolutely had a blast with Jay talking about essentially just action movies, which I think has been, and this can lead into Twisters if you want. I think that's been absolutely been at the detriment of 2024 releases in the summer, because I'm watching potentially some of the great action movies of my lifetime. And I think we need to reevaluate, me and Jay, what we program in the summer, because it might affect how I feel about the quality of the current state of cinema.
It's such an unfortunate thing, as fun as it can be to go back through the movies that we either grew up with or just classics that we know are good, that have aged even better because of the landscape of modern movies nowadays. It sadly puts this like overarching dark cloud on modern releases. So if that's my way of tying this into Twisters in some way, hopefully that worked out.
Look at you.
I did not have that one written down. So I'm actually
it's like coming home. I'm telling you that. Like it's I feel like Daisy Edgar Jones right now. I'm coming home, baby. Let's go.
It's great to have you home, my friend. We are of course here to discuss Twisters, but Ryan, you did mention something important there about us being essentially 90s kids going to Blockbuster, pulling movies off the shelves, which is a great segue to at least first acknowledge that first Twister from 1996, directed by Jan de Bont, starring Helen Hunt, and of course the late great Bill Paxton. So I think before we get into our thoughts on Twisters, let's at least first give some brief thoughts on Twister, singular, as we lead into this new one. So is that a film that you caught up with pretty recently in preparation for Twisters? Is it one that you saw back when it first came out? Is it one you always loved? Is it one that maybe you learned to love as time went on? What's your experience with it?
I think that, that's a lot of questions to throw at me, Brendan.
You're welcome. You do the same with me, so
that's fair. That's fair.
Scratching it up.
To answer your question, I did rewatch this recently, because the wife wanted to watch it, and it was, and Friday nights have become action movie Friday nights for us here at the house. So I mean, that's been a lot of fun. Denzel Washington movies and Tony Scott's and. We watched Face Off one night. That was great.
I love Face Off. I love that movie so much.
It's so vile, but it's so great. They don't make movies like that anymore.
I know.
And they don't make movies like Twister anymore. This is a great movie for what it is. I don't think it's like a 5-star masterpiece or anything. But for what it is, which is just a popcorn movie, and in kind of just a simple concept of these people chasing tornadoes, right? And it's sort of a very niche film, and de Bont is a really good action director in his own right for the most part, and I think the movie excels because it has memorable, unique supporting characters, and it has chemistry between the leads. I think it also has a great score that goes along with it, and I think that the set pieces are not overdone, and it's kind of almost minimal at times, but in between is this great banter and this great connectivity between the team, and there's a little bit of a silly sort of romance or love triangle, but it's not really a love triangle because we all know Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt are going to be together.
What's going to happen.
We know they're literally the two on the poster. It's like,
it's a blueprint waiting to happen for a rom-com. And
Exactly.
I think what makes Twister so interesting now is that in many ways the narrative is not too dissimilar from something like His Girl Friday. It is a classic rom-com formulaically. It just happens to have really big tornadoes in the background, and I'm kind of with you. I do love that first Twister quite a bit. It's surprisingly loose in the way that character banter is treated. It almost has like this hangouty kind of vibe. It doesn't always feel scripted, which I really like. A lot of people have cited the food scene
that food looks so good at the aunt's house. Like that gravy, poured it on everything. Put it on a boot and I'd eat it.
Aunt May's gravy is famous. It's practically a food group.
Yeah. That's the thing too. It's so there's so many memorable lines.
I know, but they don't feel scripted, which I weirdly admire about the film. It's got a loose hangouty energy to it, and even the romance itself, or the love triangle, if you want to call it that, it's not the most complex thing in the world. But I kind of respect that there isn't this condemning or condoning of putting someone like Jamie Gertz through the ringer like they do. It's simply this idea of someone that needs and feels the need to live this extreme lifestyle and is lying to himself to get away from it. And there is that acknowledgement in it, which I do think is at least somewhat fascinating in a movie like this. Twister is a really cool movie. I've always liked this thing.
Paxton's great though.
Yeah.
He's phenomenal. It's one of, he just had an energy as a performer. He's a 90s guy through and through.
Yeah.
Big time guy with Big Jim.
Yeah.
Big Jim's my guy now. Copyrighted that and proved.
Big Jim.
And Hunt's great too. I'm usually not like the biggest fan of hers, but I think she's really good.
Her comedic
I mean,
timing's really good in this film.
Really good.
Yeah.
There's a shot in that movie that makes me like cry every time. I think you know what it is, where it's like it's Paxton and it's early on in this first like 20 minutes, I think, in the film, and it's like Paxton and Philip Seymour Hoffman
Oh,
are in the
Going
same
Green.
shot. Yeah, and they're just like
Yeah.
they're just the two of them, and it's just like, wow, this is kind of two great actors that we lost. One being a generational actor in Philip Seymour Hoffman, and this is one of their legacy. I mean, like the fact that like Todd Field is one of like the people a part
director
of the team,
Tar.
director of Tar, and in the
Alan Ruck's
bedroom,
great.
you know?
Yeah,
It's a great group of people. You know what I mean? And DeBont does a good amount of kind of laying the groundwork to get you in to this group and have a true lived in history. That's the thing about it, is that you feel the lived in history. You feel that they've been the kind of the grind of it for most of them.
You feel like they genuinely know each other already, that they've known each other for a while. I wanted to go out and grab beers with Dusty and Rabbit. I really did. I feel like they'd have great stories to share. And you're also right about the film's score. Mark Mancina, underrated composer. I don't think we talk about him all that much, and not just his work here, but you look at some of his other films that he has scored back in the 90s. His score for Speed, also a Jan de Bont film, is amazing. Absolutely amazing
Speed.
Stuff.
Don't ever make another Speed. They learned that the hard way. But Speed is a 5 out of 5 masterpiece.
I think I'm with you. One of the best action movies of the 90s.
This is one of the more solid. I will watch this all the time. 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I will see it. Like I know that it's probably higher for people, but like I think that this is just like the classic 3.5 strong. A 3.5 and a like. How about that? You know what I mean? That's what it is.
I'm with you. I'm with you in many ways. I think I graded Twister a 4 out of 5 simply due to maybe nostalgia blinders have to play into that as well. But I think, in actuality, it probably is more of a 3.5 out of 5 star rating. But even so, that mathematically, that's the equivalent of a 7 out of 10. That's a high grade.
That's what it is. And it's a really solid, fun. I don't have a problem with it if it's on TNT, which is it was a TNT classic when we grew up.
It was a staple back then. It really was.
Then, like, of course, I'm gonna watch it. Or someone says, "Hey, I've never seen Twister." I'm like, I'm gonna be like, "Okay, well, it's not the worst 1 hour and 45 minutes I've ever spent in my life. Let's go." And that's the thing; it's very lean and it moves and but it knows when to be patient. It doesn't force the issue. It's a good template movie. And sometimes you just need a good template movie.
Yeah. I am sad that the best character from Twister does not make an appearance in Twisters, and that's the cow. Did you hear Glenn Powell's reasoning for why the cow didn't make it into Twisters? Someone asked him that in an interview.
What did he say?
He just went, "Oh, it died."
Yeah. I'm sure. Well, I mean, not to like get all up in that, but like, I mean, there was that whole thing about the PETA protester at the premiere for the LA premiere of Twisters,
which makes that joke even more, I don't want to say hilarious, but just weirdly timed, I guess.
I mean, it's weirdly timed, but it's also like if you watch Twisters, there's nothing it makes them look like fools because there's nothing really bad in this movie that happens to an animal to the extent of a cow literally going in a twister.
I mean, you get horses running around, but there's nothing that severe or even dramatic.
Like a regular rodeo trick. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
it's something you see in many movies that feature horses. I'll simply say,
like, there's probably worse things that happen to animals in Horizon that happen than in Twisters.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
A lot of horses in Horizon.
A lot of horsies. You know?
Yeah.
3 hours worth of horsies.
I actually really liked Horizon.
Did you really like it?
I really liked it. Yeah, I was kind of won over by it.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how bummed were you when they delayed the second part? Like, were you like, damn it? Like, did you like
personally bummed? Yes, because I was actually looking forward to chapter 2, but I understand why they did it. I don't think the release idea of having
two movies
so
in
close,
2 months.
so close together was really the best call for it.
No, it's a dumb move. It's a really bad move.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm looking forward to chapter 2, and I hope I get to see it at some point, regardless of how it gets released to us. I hope it goes to theaters at some point, but honestly, I don't really know if that's going to happen anymore.
I don't know. I mean, it might just be straight to a streamer at this point, but we'll see.
We'll see. But those are our thoughts on Twister. Let's move on to the plural version of it. Twister. Twisters.
Okay.
This film was directed by Lee Isaac Chung, whose last film, Minari, was one of the best films of 2020. That was really exciting. This film also stars Daisy Edgar Jones and Glenn Powell. Those are really the big ones, but let's also call out some of the other character actors here. It also features Anthony Ramos, Brendan Pereira, Sasha Lane, David Cornsweet, aka Superman himself, with some very brief appearances by Maura Tierney, Daryl McCormick, and Kiernan Shipka, among a few others. And this one tells the story of a retired tornado chaser and meteorologist who is persuaded to return to Oklahoma to work with a new team and new technologies. It's a pretty similar synopsis to its predecessor, but you know what? As the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we'll talk about whether that works in the film's favor or not. So, Ryan, let's kick it over back to you. What are your thoughts on Twisters?
Okay. So I was really looking forward to this movie because we saw this trailer all the way back at the Super Bowl.
We did.
And I am one for kind of movies like this because disaster movies can be really fun.
Yeah.
And they can be a good change of pace to the superhero movies or the regular sort of normal franchisification that we have going on in the world. You know, like as much as I like the new, Planet of the Apes movie, it's like the 900th Planet of the Apes movie. This is a very rare thing where
the
it's like
official number.
It's
in the franchise.
900.
That's its official spine number when you go and pick it up.
I've
on the Criterion
seen
Collection.
all of them, and I don't have much time left in my life. But I've seen them all. Or like the 20th adventure of Gru and the Minions, which is basically the same one as the first one, just repackaged with a different joke. So like it's nice to see this, and we're starting to get tests, Brendan. I don't know if you and JD talk about this enough, but we're getting tests from studios. We're in our testing phase right now, which is the test is part of I think the overall game show premise of who wants to be a movie star, because we don't have those right now and we need them desperately. We need movie stars desperately right now because Hollywood, if they want to survive, at least in the theatrical premise of, how it is now, they need to have people that audiences can cling to and go to see.
Yeah.
There's one right now, and that's Chalamet. And people will go like, oh, no. He's got one of the number one movies of this year in Dune.
Yeah.
He's got one of the biggest blockbuster successes last year in Wonka.
Yeah.
Wonka was a giant hit. I can't believe that I know a lot about Wonka. We were in a text thread literally today, myself, Jay Ledbetter, Sophia Simonello. Someone made a Wonka joke, and I literally said one of the other characters that wasn't Willy Wonka from that movie, and I went, holy hell, I know too much about Wonka. Anyway, that's beside the point.
It's a cute movie, I guess.
He is a movie star. So we need to find out who else is a movie star. Is Austin Butler a movie star? Well, he was in Dune. He was in Elvis. Bike Riders, maybe. Yeah, he's close. Again. Is Zendaya a movie star based off of how Challengers have done and her other IP? Maybe.
She's
outside of the Dune crew, which is essentially all the movie stars.
That's a band I want to see live. The Dune crew.
Dune crew. Coming to the stage. The Dune crew.
The Duners.
The Duners. The Dunettes. It's just all the ladies from Dune.
All the mothers.
It's Rebecca Ferguson, lead singer. We need to find out who that is. And Glenn Powell is definitely doing it the old school way. He is doing it where he's in Top Gun Maverick. He's in Anyone But You. He's in Hitman. He's writing. He's producing. He's probably going to direct one of these days. He's in rom-coms. He's in action films. He's four quadrang the hell out of himself. He's remaking every damn movie under the sun right now, it looks like. So he's pretty close. But who else from these casts are going to be that? You know what I mean? Who can branch out from that?
Sure.
Katie O'Brien's had a Love Life's Bleeding, and she's in this, and she broke out. Brandon Perea was a Nope. Daisy Edgar Jones, she's big from from Normal People and Where the Crawdad Sings, but like, is she a movie star? Is she someone to put out there? So it's a great test, and it's an interesting film for like who you said up at the beginning of all this, Lee Isaac Chung.
Yeah.
not going the Marvel route, but instead going a franchise route that's different, kind of revitalizing it. Honestly, if you watch Minari, it kind of makes sense for him to do a environmental film like Twister, because of the way that movie's shot and everything.
It's so rural. Yeah, he brings
it's
those,
so
those
rural. It
middle
makes
American roots
perfect
here. Yeah.
sense. So everything on paper is kind of like building up for a good test or an interesting film or a fun film. And it's in the Maverick kind of spot this year in the summer, where it's like, it's in July and, we don't have Tom Cruise and Powell's trying to position himself like that. And then I saw the film and it's not very good. And
all that build up for that payoff.
It's not very good. Outside of, I learned a couple of good things. One, I learned that Glenn Powell is a movie star, and
sure,
you put him in anything, he's going to be the best part of it. He has it. Hollywood, put him in everything. He has it. He's a great interviewer. He's got great charisma. He is the successor to Matthew McConaughey. He is that.
Oh yeah.
He is and
so Texas.
And at times I think he could be just as good of an actor, because McConaughey has range, and we saw that during the McConaissance. He's a phenomenal actor. I know that, he sounds like he's doing peyote all the time nowadays for Lincoln commercials, but he is actually a really good actor. And I think Powell's going to get there. And I think he's the reason to see this movie, because he's the only reason why this movie works, because the first 20 minutes of this movie, he's not in it. And the first 20 minutes of this movie explain to you all the problems with modern filmmaking, which is that all the other actors in this movie are not movie stars, and they don't understand the assignment. They're not actually particularly really good. The script cannot be elevated then by their performances. And the action there is fine, but you're not invested in these characters. And that's the thing about Twister that makes you so invested. When we were talking about it, is that you have bought in so much from those supporting characters all the way up to Paxton and Hunt, that you want them to get away from from the disaster set pieces that they're going to be a part of.
For sure.
And early on in the film, there is this really devastating personal scene to Daisy Edgar Jones and to Anthony Ramos. And I could care less. What happened to them. I saw it all coming, and it didn't feel scary. It didn't feel.
The trailers kind of give it away too, unfortunately. Indirectly, they do. They
indirectly, I guess. But I kind of stopped after the Super Bowl teaser.
Wise.
I'm trying to get away from watching trailers for everything. You know my stance on this. Unless it's a really, really good trailer, and I know I'm going to love it. I gotta, I'm trying to stay away from it.
Yeah, that's a wise choice.
And then I watch them afterwards, and some of them are wow. Some of them give the whole movie away. But yeah, Powell comes in about 20-30 minutes, and he makes Daisy Edgar Jones better. He makes Anthony Ramos better, who both of those performers are not very good in this movie. I think Daisy Edgar Jones is completely miscast. I think Anthony Ramos has the charisma of a doorknob. I think that David Krumholtz, if he's going to be Superman, yikes. I think that the better film here is the charisma that Powell and Brandon Perea have in their sequences. They have energy.
The Wranglers. The Wranglers.
Yeah, they're the Wranglers. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of palpable. Well, I was like, damn.
I get why
that should be really good. That should be the movie.
Yeah, I get why the film maybe tries to distance itself from being that, because otherwise it is basically a 100% carbon copy of Twister, because that's
what we're here for, Brendan.
I'm not trying to defend the choice. I'm saying, I guess if I'm trying to understand maybe why that choice was made, that may have been the reason. But if anything, when we see that camaraderie in the end credits of this movie, Twisters, you might sit there and think, I think this is the movie I was really hoping to see. Yeah, and I think that's a fair point to make.
I'm not gonna make this comparison, but I am gonna make this comparison.
Like how you said, I'm not going to do it, but I'm gonna do it.
But I'm gonna do it anyway. So this would be like, this movie is frustrating because this movie doesn't know what it wants to be. This movie doesn't know if it wants to be its own thing, if it wants to be a legacy sequel, if it wants to be a spinoff, if it wants to be a reboot. It doesn't know what it wants to be.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned More Attorney, which I felt like was going to be a spoiler, but I guess it's not.
No.
But I think the way you have to talk about this character is exactly how you have to talk about how this character is presented.
Mm-hmm.
This movie made me feel like I was getting rope-a-doped Spider-Man No Way Home style or Star Trek Into Darkness style, where everyone had said, Helen Hunt's not in this, Helen Hunt's not in this, Helen Hunt's not in this, or nobody from the original cast is in this movie. But the way Daisy Edgar-Jones doesn't answer her phone when her mom calls, when she says, my mom's got barbecue waiting for us at home, which is very much a callback to their, food is at my aunt's house.
Aunt May.
Aunt May. Then she doesn't want to reveal her last name to the reporter who is covering Tyler Owens, played by Glenn Powell.
Yeah. First off, it's Aunt Meg, not Aunt May. That's Spider-Man. So Aunt Meg,
Spider-Man.
Lois Smith.
So, and then the last thing, which is the total nostalgia, pull it out or whatever out of your ass sort of trick. More Attorney comes out of the dark after you hear, what's her name? Kate? Kate? And it's the slow turn to darkness. And then More Attorney just comes out and you're like, wait, what are we doing here? Who is she? Like, is this just her mom? Like, it's so weird what Lee Isaac Chung
do you think in theory,
do
you think in theory her character, More Attorney specifically, was maybe meant to be conveyed by someone else who we might recognize?
I think so.
Okay.
I think whether it is
point.
Helen Hunt or somebody else in this cast from the original film, I think it was. But the thing is that you can make those adjustments as you're filming if you can't lock that actor down. But they didn't. So it feels completely weird again, because that whole character story, they make her feel like she is literally the daughter of Paxton and Helen Hunt. She's got this sixth sense to storm tracking.
There is a weird sense of foreshadowing that doesn't really deliver anything. And I don't know if that was due to expectations of us going in, or if there is something that was maybe originally there as a placeholder for something else. I think that's a pretty interesting observation.
I don't know, Brendan. And that's the thing, is like this movie just lives in this weird realm of wanting you to embrace its nostalgia because it's called Twisters. But and having the Dorothy machine from the original in there. And literally it looks like the Dorothy machine, and they literally call it Dorothy. Yeah. And yet this movie doesn't want to embrace its past. It's a weird way to do legacy movies making, and one that's kind of not interesting in a way that I think is like, oh, it's subversive and it's different. Like, it's one in like, I think it's confused, and it feels like while Lee Isaac Chung makes a movie that I think looks good, and like the third act set piece is pretty fine, and Powell, when he's in this thing, man, this movie starts moving, and then when he's not, it starts feeling like corporations are bad, and the small town is getting affected by, by the big machine coming in and buying up the land, and and it feels like, thank God they didn't talk about climate change, because that was already on the nose the entire time. So I don't know.
So the idea of climate change is kind of here in some ways. I don't think they need to directly comment on it. It is sensed. You calling the film a quote unquote test run, I think, is a very interesting one. And it is maybe one of the big reasons why I was pretty disappointed in this movie. Yeah. The reason I was looking forward to this was mostly due to director Lee Isaac Chung, as it just made sense to take advantage of his rural American roots, as we were talking about already. I don't know if it's the production side of things that's the issue, or if Lee Isaac Chung was just not quite up to the challenge in attempting to blend those roots of his with its blockbuster bigness. In a weird way, I was actually very much reminded of another summer movie from this year, and that was A Quiet Place Day One. And that was a film where director Michael Sarnowski had the difficult task of trying to balance his indie roots from Pig with that franchise's post-apocalyptic backdrop. And I did think I did feel there was a disconnect with that film, despite concluding in a very strong way. And that's more or less how I feel about Twisters. I think Lee Isaac Chung gets the sense of place right. The Oklahoma setting, I think, is well depicted here. I love that he chose to do it on location. I'm just not sure if that synergy between character and big thrills, I'm not sure if that works as well, especially when compared to something like Twister, as we just talked about, which I do think does get that balance really well. So I think maybe by calling this a test run for what we actually want to see from not just legacy sequels, but also who is a movie star and who isn't, the movie does sort of feel like it's testing the grounds of how audiences will respond. And I don't think that's the best way to make a movie. I think it's best to just commit to what your vision is and let it out. And I'm not saying this movie is a test run, but I think by saying it feels like one is it's an interesting observation. I don't know if I agree, but I don't know if I necessarily disagree either.
Yeah.
I do think that's unfortunate because there are some good things here, mostly regarding some of these performances that we can continue to highlight as this conversation unfolds. But I'm with you. I was a little bit mixed on this one, and that's unfortunate to say.
I think I think the problem with this comes down to the script. And because I think the direction and the cinematography is pretty good for a movie like this, of this scale, of to see the elevation of Lee Isaac Chung make this really small, intimate film in Minari, and then come to make I feel like at times it's trying to be, even though it's on a big scale, he's trying to feel a sense of intimacy in this small town, and
it doesn't really feel like a director for hire. Like, in a way,
No.
it does kind of feel like a Lee Isaac Chung film, and that's why I'm not sure if he's someone I want to maybe criticize a little bit if he's not really quite up to the challenge in synchronizing his rural American roots with how big this movie is ultimately going to get. I'm with you. I think the film is mostly well shot, primarily because so much of it is on location. I do wish, though, it didn't quite have that usual digital sheen that we sometimes see in movies. And that's interesting to say because this movie was shot on Kodak 35 millimeter. And I believe that first Twister was as well. I think it's just proof that shooting on film itself is not necessarily the magic formula to make a movie look good. I think a lot of it also comes down to how it's framed, how it's rendered, and despite this being shot on film and on location, it still does carry a bit of that digital sheen that we sometimes see, and it did make the sense of scale here a little bit limiting, unfortunately, because I don't think the issue is the visual effects. I think the visual effects are fine. I think it's more so really, like I said before, it's the rendering of them. It's how they're presented. I think there is something a little bit off there.
I think that's just Brendan, I think that's just the problem with modern filmmaking. That's not, I don't even know if that's a slap in
it's a
the
universal
creator's faces.
issue.
I think that's a
it's not a
universal
Twisters
issue.
It's a Hollywood issue. Yeah, you're right.
And it's just it's the sad reality of that. Like, in 30 years, we've really made terrible strides. But I think that the problem lies, and I mean, I would be interested to hear what he had to say, is that he isn't a credited screenwriter. The screenwriter is Mark L. Smith, who did The Revenant.
Yeah.
Joseph Kaczynski, who was the director of Top Gun Maverick, was originally supposed to do the film.
They went through a few directors. He was one of them, as well as Dan Trachtenberg, I think, and Travis Knight. So it did circulate through a few directors.
I think it ended up in the right hands.
I agree. I think all the names they circulated, he's the right one that they chose.
I don't know if he took a pass at this script, because it does feel like a very Kaczynski written script, where it feels very feels very on the nose, very superficial. The one-liners are eye-rolly at best. It feels like a first pass, and it feels like a movie trying to find catchphrases at times rather than actually develop characters. And then you mix in probably one of the worst soundtracks of the damn year.
Okay,
Which is
I have thoughts about that soundtrack. I really do. Maybe we'll save that for the end.
I think we need to save that for the end because it was cringe. I was sitting there the whole time. We'll talk about it, but
yeah.
I think that there's just like for every decision that Lee Isaac Chung makes here that I think is really interesting. Either there's producers or screenplay or a casting decision that sort of take me back a couple steps, and that's why I think it's so uneven and disappointing because like everything on paper kind of is not is the issues that I kind of have a problem with it because I was worried about Lee Isaac Chung kind of being a
yeah.
part of it because that transition from making a small film to a giant film can engulf directors and lose their vision. I don't think that that's the problem. I think that, I mean, outside of Pal, I don't think that there is a damn interesting character in this movie.
I think you're getting into the thing I want to talk about, and also it sounds like I agree with you on. But before I get to that, let's go back to that first Twister, which was co-written by Michael Crichton, one of the most legendary novelists of his time, who wrote novels like Jurassic Park and Rising Sun and many others. And as a co-writer on that film, even that script felt kind of catchphrasy as well, but it proves just how much you could still make that work when the delivery is right. And I think that might be my issue as well with Twisters. I do think Glenn Powell here is quite good. And thankfully, I have a movie like Hitman in my back pocket to also compare it to, because if I hadn't seen Hitman, I would have gotten nervous that Glenn Powell is starting to fall more into like the Ryan Reynolds shtick kind of vibe.
Yeah.
It feels as though he was directed to just be Glenn Powell in this movie. But he's so good at it that it almost doesn't matter. Yet at the same time, I'm glad that I have a movie like Hitman to compare it to that showcases range and that he can do it all. But yeah, you're right. He is very good here. Daisy Edgar Jones is sadly the weak link for me. And I say that sadly because I've liked her in a lot of things outside of this. Even a movie that's I don't think is very good, like Where the Crawdads Sing. I think she's good in that. At least like she made me invested in where the story was going, despite it not being a very good story as far as that movie was presenting it. But I don't think she really works all that well here. And I don't know if it's her performance or if it's the movie not rightfully serving her acting abilities. It could be a mixture of the two. I'm not really sure. But I was disappointed in seeing the main focus of this movie be someone that I had a really difficult time connecting with. It really is a lot of the smaller characters, the character actors, really, you want to call them, that do shine. Brendan Pereira is great here. Anthony Ramos, I think he has a few moments that I was able to buy into, but you're right. It is a pretty uneven performance at times.
Yeah.
And as painfully underwritten as David Cornsweet is, I think he at least sells the corporate jerk fairly well.
He's got a corporate jerk face, all right.
He kind of does. He kind of does, yeah.
Which is then funny that he's going to be Superman, because it's like, yeah, that just sounds like he's the perfect person to play a commodity like Superman. Honestly, he's going to be great with that.
Sasha Lane is great in this.
She's great.
Katie O'Brien is great in this, and I loved her in Love Lies Bleeding as well. I thought that was.
I wish we just spent more time with them, Brendan. That's the thing, is by the time we get to them, they're introduced as adversaries rather than as equals, and we have to spend so much time between Daisy Edgar Jones and Anthony Ramos versus Glenn Powell, right? It's almost like they're setting up a reversal of it's Carriolla's, right? Who's like
that's basically what they're doing. They're temporarily flipping the script, only to then revert back to the same script, which I don't think is necessarily a bad idea. I just don't know if the movie justifies that choice enough to find that switch engaging. And I think it really does come down to Daisy Edgar Jones in many ways.
I think it would work if you had an interesting cast of characters that worked for Cornsweet and for Ramos, right? Because at least with Ulysses, Brigade of Bad Guys, you got some people that are interesting and they go back and forth, and there's some characters that, before they kind of get killed in Twister.
It's the charisma. It's the charisma.
Yeah, it's they're you get a little bit more from them in those scenes than you do an entire. I mean, we get a meetup scene where it's all these guys and they're supposed to be super smart and da 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 da. And yet, yeah, like the only, like, none of it matters, guys, because we got Kate here and she's like the tornado whisperer. You know what I mean?
And that's the difference between a movie like Twister and Twisters, is that while both films feature scripts that can be dubbed as kind of catchphrasey, like we were talking about, the movie here with Twister is it feels, how do I want to say this? It feels more driven by plot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's driven by just human interaction, and this is just driven by we got to get from this point to this point, then we got to get them together, and then now there's a divide between Ramos and Daisy Edgar Jones and Glenn Powell and all these characters and da 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 da, and it's now we got to like get these two to but then we don't want them to have a relationship because modern audiences can't even have a hug or a kiss in a movie, let alone a sex scene. So like we can't have that anymore, and because that didn't test well, you know what I mean? And then Anthony Ramos is like a jerk, but then we got to redeem his ass. It's like this movie. It's like this movie went through so many hands, and it felt like, as a script, it just felt like we're doing everything wrong that like almost like Star Wars fandom and storytelling of that franchise went, where it's like we've got to redeem all these people, and yet we've got to have these people come together.
I would not go as far as to say this is the rise of Skywalker of the Twister.
This is not
franchise.
that bad.
It's not that.
But like it feels the bones of that. You know what I mean? Like it's like
it does feel like there were a lot of different hands with different ideas, and perhaps this was just kind of a first draft of those ideas.
They all threw them all out there, and then they're like, "Oh well, we gotta shoot this thing because we have a release date." You know what I mean? Yeah. And then it's like, because Daisy Edgar Jones, who I think she could be a really good actress. I like Normal People. She's very good on that show. She was very good on that with Paul Mescal.
She was good in was it Fresh with Sebastian Stan? Which
she was good. I didn't like
care
the
for the movie that much, but I thought
she
was really good in it.
She was very good in that. I think, her accent work is completely off. She's like floating in and out between having a twang and having no twang at all, to then being like the traditional British person of, I am from America. This is how I talk. But I also kind of found that interesting as a person that's trying to hide the fact that they're from Oklahoma after an event, and the fact that she keeps trying to hide who she is. That was an interesting choice.
Like inadvertently working symbolically, I guess.
It's kind of working, even though I think it's just inconsistent.
It's an accident, maybe.
Yeah, it's an accidental great mistake.
Yeah.
But I just, to me, it's she's just there, man. She's just there, and she's indestructible, and there's nothing wrong with her. And she, she's got a couple of inner moments, but it's okay because Glenn Powell fixed it. But she's really she's the real tornado wrangler, because she's the real, she's got the science behind her and stuff. And it just feels so, on a script level, formulaic.
It feels so written.
Pandering.
It feels very written. And that's maybe that's why Tyler Owens, played by Glenn Powell, feels more interesting to watch, because he doesn't feel written.
No, he feels organic.
It's the one character in this movie. Well, really, not even one. It's really two, and that's Glenn Powell and Brandon Pereira.
Yeah,
they're the two here that don't really feel like their lines were written. It almost feels
they're
like
playing by their own rules.
Yeah, I mean, like the Wranglers are. Really, almost all of the Wranglers don't really feel all that written. They're the ones that are obviously most comparable to that first Twister and the gang there. And that's not to say we want this to be the same thing. We're just commenting on that because it's the one thing in Twisters that I feel like was ultimately working.
But Brendan,
and I wanted more of that.
Isn't that what we signed up for, though?
Well, yes and no.
Isn't that what kind of makes a movie like this interesting? It's like that movie is. I mean, here's the thing about comparing these two: is the comparison to this is Top Gun Maverick, because of the Kaczynski of it all.
Sure,
Top Gun Maverick has Top Gun as its template, but it's able then to make obviously it has characters, like the lead character is literally from the other movie. So like
Well,
they at least fully embrace the
it
nostalgic or Lego
yeah,
sequelness of it.
it has it both
And
ways.
it has it both ways.
Yeah.
But I would make the argument, this is me. I know JD will probably kill me for saying this because he loves Top Gun. I think
Mhm.
Top Gun Maverick is a better movie than Top Gun. And it's definitely because of all the emotional connections you have to Top Gun. But there's something in the machine, in the slushy that came out
Mhm.
of that movie. And it made for just this beautiful blend of nostalgia and emotional impact on me as a moviegoer. I'm like,
Mhm.
this is the kind of, if you're going to do it within this formula, this is how you earn those
Well,
moments of wonder and then emotion. This movie is weird, man.
well,
It's a weird movie because it doesn't want to be that.
would it have been pretty interesting if, and I'm not saying that this is something Twisters should have done, or this thing I'm about to say doesn't even necessarily have to pertain to Twisters, really just
Mhm.
any long-awaited sequel. There's something to be said about a movie that comes around, is a sequel to something many years later, and what
Mhm.
if it just comes out and repeats the exact same formula, but does it really well, that it actually
Yeah,
creates a different argument for that? Because we often find that as a criticism, that it's, "Oh, it's doing the exact same thing once again, that's lazy," but is there ever a time when it's okay to do that? And
I think there is.
I
It's The
think
Force
Twisters could
Awakens.
have, well, what's that? Sorry?
The Force Awakens was that,
Well,
where we kind of,
that one still had a bit of like, an interesting deconstruction on myth and things like that, that we're able
but
to
but
segue into The Last Jedi.
the bones of that movie, though, and this has been argued many times, but the bones
Mhm,
of that movie is, and it's the criticism that people throw at the Force Awakens that
mhm.
I disagree with.
Yeah,
Sure, the bones of that movie as a story is structured as A New Hope,
yeah.
but there's a lot more than just that under it,
Well,
and that's what
it
makes that
takes
movie
that
so great.
structure, it takes that
Yeah,
structure to comment on something new around it. So in a
exactly.
way, it's doing the same thing while also deconstructing it simultaneously,
Yeah.
which makes that movie interesting. What
Mhm.
I'm saying is, what if there's a movie that comes around that is a long-awaited sequel and literally is just the same thing? Like, I think Twisters here, like, if this were literally like step by step the exact same thing as 1996's Twister, I don't think I would have been opposed to that.
No.
And that's not to say that's me commenting on a movie I would have preferred to see aside from the movie that we got. But the movie that we did get, the things I'm honing in on that I think genuinely work in Twisters in a vacuum are coincidentally the things that also work best in Twister.
Yeah.
So it just, it makes it seem as though I think I would have liked Twisters more if it was even more like its predecessor.
Well, yeah, because that movie, the plot of that movie is just, we're gonna see if Dorothy can work.
Get these cells in the sky.
Get
That's what it
cells
was.
in the sky. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
And can
Don't care,
and
like, as a viewer, we don't care about the science. I actually have a
no,
really close friend that I went to high school with that is a meteorologist and actually lives in Colorado chasing tornadoes right now. I should text him after this and see if the details and Twisters are right. I doubt that they are, but
I doubt that they are, but
it's at least fun to have that kind of connection. But the point is, we don't go to these movies to ponder on that. Uh,
no,
yeah, that's not
that
important.
that's the thing about DuPont's movie, which makes it so great, is that I'm not trying to think in a Twisters movie. Maybe in a
Yeah.
Top Gun movie, I can think, you know what I mean? Or maybe, in a
Yeah,
Star
because
Wars, or
there's nuance there
I mean,
to,
the wrong way to do this formula is obviously the Ghostbusters movies,
yeah, yeah.
which is a really bad way. It's like on the verge of saccharine what you're
Yeah,
doing there.
yeah, I
And
would agree.
so I don't want that, but I want you to, like, because, yeah, okay, here's the real skinny. You want the real skinny? Here's the truth.
Oh, you're going deep now, you're going deep.
I think that this movie, the problem with this movie is it feels like a checkbox at times of things that modern audiences want to see rather than actually making a good movie at times. And I think that
Okay.
I'm not calling studio interference because we don't know about any of that, but it
Mhm.
feels like the director is trying his best. And I think I have no problems with Lee Isaac Chung.
Yeah.
You're not going to hear a single bad thing from me from this guy. He is doing the best he can with this script that I'm glad he didn't put his name on. And he's doing it with actors that, I'm sorry, but I think the David Cornsweet character could have just been erased, and he could have just been Anthony Ramos, because Anthony Ramos and him could have been combined into one character and just have a straight up villain.
Oh yeah, it doesn't change the arc of the movie at all.
It doesn't change it at all.
Like I said, I like David Cornsweet's performance enough because he just has that face, like we talked about. But at the same time, I'm with you. I don't think I don't think he affects the story outside of just reminding you of Cary Elwes from the first film.
Well, and then the big bad guy that's buying up all the land, does he have more than like 2 lines? He doesn't even even though
I actually kind of like the facelessness of him. Like that's one thing I will praise the movie for.
He can't show up in 3 scenes though, Brendan, and not say anything. It's like, that's super weird.
I didn't mind that. I
wish it was I wish it was kind of like Ed Harris or somebody like that was like, that could come in and not be a little mustache twirly, but just be in there and be like, I need a true villain. The movie didn't feel like it had a true villain. Because if you're going to be plotty, you need to have villain. You need to have somebody that is alongside them and you're having fun. But the whole audience knows she's going to flip over to Glenn Powell in like 20 minutes. So like, we're going to just get through that. Or
which is funny because it takes like 90 minutes until they actually team up, right?
Yeah. But I kind of feel like they should have just had them opposites. And what it would have been actually really interesting is if she's caught in the middle between 2 moral quandaries of not tapping into the social media-ness of the, they make Tyler Owens he's also a kind of a god because
he's a YouTuber.
Everything he does, right, in terms of all the money and everything, it goes back into the communities. Right. He's got his car is rigged to the point where it can literally withstand a tornado going through it. Yeah. This is the John Wick bulletproof sort of the bulletproof suit argument. Is that
it's Tornado
Wick?
It's
Tornado Wick, Chapter 4, Parabellum or whatever. It's like you can't really get any of these people in any real danger, and then therefore it kind of undercuts the impact of these tornadoes that are going to like literally kill them. And so you have that with these underwritten plot driven characters rather than just natural character progressions. And it's a weird freaking movie, dude.
Yeah, I want to be careful that we don't end up trying to review a movie that we would have preferred to see versus the one that we got, because I do think that's dangerous territory. But I would at least agree that sense of danger and the sense of scale, something about it seems to be missing here.
Yeah.
And I think that is very unfortunate, because with that first Twister, which is a film from 1996, and to be fair, most of those effects still don't hold up.
No.
But
the cow's literally in one of them. Like,
but it's all about framing and how it's presented, that there's still this mustiness, this dirtiness, this graininess to it that actually makes it feel like you could be standing there. It's almost like the Gareth Edwards effect. And while his films look great usually all the time, it's not just the visual effects themselves, it's how he's able to frame it that actually makes things feel genuinely big and genuinely large. Well, and I think Jan de Bont was able to do that in that first Twister.
Brendan, the key set piece for me in Twister is when they're out of the car and they're running towards the barn, right?
Is that towards the end, or
towards the end when they're like the house doesn't get affected.
It doesn't take the house, and they tie themselves to the whatever that was, the steel rods in the ground or something like that.
Because you want to know what? Because it's terrifying, and it's still terrifying, and there's nothing even remotely close to this. Like, even there's supposed to be a scene there is a scene in the beginning of the film, and I don't think that this is. I think, to go back to what you're saying, we're not reviewing a movie and saying what we wish. Like, this is literally the movie where we're sitting here and we're going like, I mean, it's okay to say when you see a horror movie, I wish it was scarier for me, or I wish it was more intently. But like, when you're breaking down this movie and you're breaking down the fact that like your main characters are indestructible weather wrangler gods and almost superhero level. And then but they're sort of these smaller actors that have a marginal face are used as just kind of cannon fodder for them to progress to the next plot point,
Sure.
literally to jump forward in time.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well then the twisters themselves become MacGuffins, or they become useless in a way.
They felt like characters in that first Twister. And there's one moment in Twisters where I do think they do feel like there is a sense of not necessarily danger, but like they actually are characters in this story. It's the one set piece I do really like, and I guess it's maybe where we can transition to the soundtrack a little bit. So that first chase where they're driving through the fields and the wind turbines are breaking apart.
Oh, yeah.
That is, for me, the best scene in the movie, and I think a lot of it comes down to the specific needle drop of Chris Stapleton's Arkansas.
Okay.
Yeah, that
Nice.
and which I don't think is on the official soundtrack, and it's because that's a song that came out in 2020 on his Starting Over album, so it wasn't made specifically for this movie. But knowing that the character Tyler Owens comes from Arkansas, I think that's it. It's on the nose and
It's
obvious,
so
but
on the nose.
it
Yeah.
really does work. And
Yeah.
maybe it's because of the way it's all edited and synchronized. It almost felt like a musical number at times.
Well, it's also because Chris Stapleton rocks. So
Chris
it's like,
Stapleton, as far as I'm concerned, Chris Stapleton and Sturgill Simpson, that's who to look out for when it comes to modern country music. Sturgill Simpson, aka Johnny Blue Skies now, he just put out a new album about a week ago. It's amazing. It is so good. But yeah, that song was wonderfully placed. I thought that was a great set piece.
Yeah, the rest of the songs suck. Like
I will the Luke Combs song, I don't hate. But
boy, what is it? The who sings the boys like or like the what is it's there's one it's like a girl power song in the middle of, like, I don't remember what the song's called, but it's something like something about boys, and and it's so on the nose because it's about, like, it comes after that sequence you're talking about, and it's the second time, and it's when Daisy Edgar Jones has found her place, where she's like, I've got them, I've got the courage now to go and and get you that data, Anthony Ramos. And I'm
maybe
like,
it's Out of Oklahoma by Lainey Wilson. I'm looking at the soundtrack list here. I'd have to go back and listen to it. And sadly, I think there are songs here I would like. I'm guessing most of these aren't in the actual movie. And that happened with the first Twister. It was known for its soundtrack, but only, I think, on that official soundtrack from 1996, maybe 5 songs were actually in the movie. The rest were just made for it, which is common for most soundtracks for most movies these days. But yeah, it may have been that song. I'm not really too sure. Needless to say,
there's like 900 songs on this soundtrack. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And I was a little mixed on the soundtrack as well, but a lot of that just could be, my own personal taste. Like, I like a lot of country music, but it's a very particular, I guess, subset of country music, and this one doesn't always capture my taste with regard to that genre. Like I mentioned, I love Chris Stapleton, I love Sturgill Simpson, I love a lot of classic outlaw country, such as Johnny Cash. I think he is one of the greatest artists who ever lived, and there are a lot of modern artists these days that are doing that. Tyler Childers is on this album, and I think he's good. He's another good one I really like these days, and I don't mind his song in the movie either. But the rest of them I could more or less take or leave, if I'm being honest.
But Brendan, what it replaces, like a great score, like in the first one, is a lot of needle drops in this one. And it feels weirdly commercialized.
Well,
for a product that's has like, I don't think the score here is really memorable. At least it wasn't for me. I don't know.
It wasn't for me either. And that was my big problem with the soundtrack, was there was no real opportunity to allow the musical score here to synchronize with the soundtrack. I think of that great scene from Twister where Mark Mancina's score, I think the track is called A Walk in the Woods, and it segues right into that movie's main theme song, Humans Being by Van Halen, which admittedly is kind of a stupid song lyrically. I mean,
it is a very stupid song. but it
musically, the
rocks.
song rocks. Musically, it rocks. Lyrically, it is. I don't know if you've read the lyrics to that song. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically the song that led to that band's breakup in many ways.
Yeah,
Uh,
like thanks a lot, everybody.
Yeah.
But like no, it works
It
for
works.
the
Yeah.
movie it's doing, and that's the thing. It's like it feels again like we got it. This is the Barbie-fication a little bit of a movie like this,
Oof.
where it's like where like Barbie works on so many levels because it's able to grab all those different things, like these great, all the top pop stars, and then it's got all
Mhm.
these, these supporting characters out the wazoo, and it's got leads that are super, like you're trying to like, but that's the thing is Daisy Edgar Jones is no Margot Robbie, and
Fair.
and
Not many
Glenn
are.
Powell, and Gosling, and that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But like that's a pretty good comparison. But like the problem is that that's a complete vision directorially by one person from page to screen to film. Whether that, all the stuff behind the scenes that Warner Brothers tried to do to get her, that's
Mhm.
remains to be seen. The final product is exactly a Greta Gerwig movie.
Sure.
This movie visually looks like a Lee Isaac Chung movie at times.
It does.
Most
And
of the time.
and when it pauses for certain character interactions, even if the performances are not quite up to snuff on everyone, it does also feel like a Lee Isaac Chung movie at times.
The
It
more
that's why I said
attorney
it.
stuff is at the house
Yeah.
feels like the closest we got, in my opinion, to that, because it's the stakes are low.
Mhm.
It goes back to her childhood. Powell's there. More Attorney is an incredible actress.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
all this, and she's got good humor to her.
Mhm.
She
Agreed.
balances these characters out. There's not a giant ass tornado or like politics or this past relationships. It's just about
Mhm.
this character trying to figure out herself.
Yeah.
And and this guy just trying to help her figure that out.
Yeah.
And I thought like that actually was the best sequence in this movie, because it just allowed these two, because that's when she's got her accent finally working, and
Mhm.
he's super attracted to her, and he's doing, and listen, all the jargon they could be saying, Brendan, could be gobbledygook. It could be terrible. It could be wrong.
It probably is, but I don't
It's
care.
probably all wrong. You can
I
ask your
don't care.
friend.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't care, because it actually works. And it's all about helping these characters resolve an issue rather than a plot issue. It's a character issue they're resolving. And that's
Yeah.
actually really good. And I wish there was more of that in the film.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I still don't think this feels like a director for hire in, like, let's say, a Marvel kind of case. This still feels like it could fit within Lee Isaac Chung's filmography, depending on where it goes. I still feel safe calling it that. It's what makes it funny how the posters all said from the producers of Jurassic World, when it really should have said from the director of Minari. And I
The Oscar-nominated director, and you just are hiding that.
oh, it's
And
such a
yet
good movie. It is
it's such a good. It's one of the 30 best of the. I did a letterbox.
It's one of the 30 best of the decade so far. I
Yeah,
think so.
I'm
Yeah.
like I've got like 30 movies and 32 movies in there right now, and
Yeah.
I'm
It's
I
up
gotta start,
there
we're
for
gonna
me.
start doing those lists soon. That's wild.
We're going to
But
be
this
having to
ain't.
do a halfway point soon. Yeah, you're right.
Oh my god!
God,
Yeah,
we're
that's
getting
gonna
old,
be
man.
wild.
We're getting
We're getting
old.
old.
We've been talking about Twisters for over an hour, it looks like. Well, if you lump in the Twister conversation earlier, but we've been talking quite a bit here. Do you have any final thoughts as we round out this conversation on Twisters?
I just wish I spent more time with those characters. They seem so cool. I think the YouTubeification of it is kind of interesting, and it could have been a real elevation and evolution of those. What felt like very, I mean, like the Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton group in the
Mhm.
original, they feel like nerds. Like they're just nerds, and they're not funded, and it's like it's real ragtag.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
idea of taking a lot of their technology and it being commercialized for YouTube clicks is a really interesting kind of way of doing this.
Mhm.
To have a commentary on that, there is none. I know that everyone wants to sort of cling on to the climate change thing, and the first film didn't do that, and this film wasn't going to do it, so I really don't give a shit about that. There's
Mhm.
other movies that are way better. There's a movie from 2004. You can go watch The Day After Tomorrow. That's a much better movie. That's actually about climate change.
Oh,
Because
wow.
this is not a movie about the end of the world. This is just a movie about tornadoes in this
Ve-
specific, which is
Yeah,
always
wow.
ruining
That's
this
our final
area.
endorsement. The Day After Tomorrow is better than Twisters.
No shit. And but
I don't know if I would go that far. I think I
it's
respect the crap
no
in Twisters more. Yeah,
as a
but even so,
climate
as a
change
climate
movie,
change movie, yeah,
that's the movie you go watch.
it's more specific on that topic.
Yes, and so I don't think you need to make this movie a climate change movie because
No,
that would add more plot and more on the nose things, and
we
I
don't
wouldn't
necessarily
necessarily
need
need
theme
that.
out of a Twister movie.
No, I don't. I just need fun, and I like the idea. I did like the set piece in the movie theater, even though that was
It's
the
very
dumbest.
Inglorious Bastards.
Yeah, there was that, and it was also the Frankenstein thing was very on the nose as well.
Yeah.
Also, just but logically speaking, and this is where Ryan McQuade gets to come back to In Session Film into a logic corner.
Oh, gotta love it.
Logically, it's the stupidest damn place for these people to go. Like, really, like you're gonna go into a movie theater where like these, and it looks like an old school movie
Well,
theater.
I guess
These
maybe they
rickety
thought
seats and these
I guess they thought it
tiers.
had a basement. I think that's the only thing that maybe they can explain because it was the closest thing nearby, and they
Some
thought it may have had a basement. I think that's the only way I can, defend it.
Also, does anybody work at that theater? Because like no
Probably.
worker there is there to tell them, hey, there's not a
Unless
basement here.
unless all the workers just ran away and abandoned it.
And I highly doubt, though, in a place like that, that there wouldn't be one, considering it's a movie about tornadoes in a mostly highly populated tornado area.
Yeah.
But I think Pal's a movie star. I'd see him in anything at this point. Um, I would see honestly, I would see Brandon Perea in anything at this point. He should be getting the chance to be a lead in something to see if he's got the big chops.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just wish it was also the other thing is wish it was a little bit more goofier. It takes itself a little too seriously. Like
Well, I think that's where the
there needs to be
balance
a
is a little bit
goofiness.
off at times, and like I mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, and why I compared it to something like A Quiet Place Day One, where I think at times it almost feels like there's this push and pull between two types of movies happening simultaneously,
Yeah.
and sometimes it does feel that way a little bit for me.
I felt that too with A Quiet Place. Yeah, that movie's too serious. These
Well,
movies are too serious.
y-
Like I want to have some fun. Like that's the problem. But
yeah.
again, Brendan, this is the problem with me watching a bunch of Tony Scott movies. Is the man tonally understands how to balance an action movie,
No,
and
and there it is. Tony Scott is so good at his job. Was so good at his job that he makes
he's
every other
so
movie
yeah.
worse. Yeah.
I
Uh,
would definitely say that for
yeah.
100. Put that on the poster, print it off.
I will say, even though I have my reservations on Twisters, I weirdly would like to see a sequel given where this film concludes and who ends up with who and how these dynamics can continue to play, because I think that's where the interesting story is. Even if you bring back Lee Isaac Chung to keep the rural American setting intact, I would not necessarily be opposed to that. I think there was potential there, and I think there's a potential opportunity to leverage that even further. And if this movie's a big hit, maybe we'll see that. I think the movie's certainly going to be the big hit this weekend, but it sadly has to compete against Deadpool Wolverine next weekend. So
Oh man,
I don't know how it's going to be in the long term, but
no.
we shall see how that goes.
Well, it's
Uh,
over, folks. Twisters,
yeah,
yeah.
Marvel's back at it. Anyway, for those of you listening, if you agree or disagree with what we had to say about Twisters, please let us know. You can leave a comment on our Facebook page, on Twitter, Instagram, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can, of course, leave a comment below. Be sure to rate and review us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It really helps out the show. And, of course, you can email us any thoughts you have at insessionfilm@gmail.com. With all of that said, Ryan, thank you for coming back home for just a few moments as we talked about this movie. It was great to get you back here on In Session Film. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about all the great work you're doing over at Awards Watch and where we can find you online?
Well, I'll be back later in the year for the other tornado movie, Wicked Part 1. Oh no.
The new
Actually,
Barbenheimer as that competes against Gladiator 2.
It's not even there's no Barbenheimer with that. There's only going to be one good movie.
You can't manufacture it. You can't manufacture
you
it.
can't manufacture, and there's only going to be one good movie out of that, and it's going to be Gladiator 2, because Wicked looks awful.
They played that trailer in front of Twisters today, and it's astounding. Just the visual look of that movie is so concerning. It really
I think
it
has a big problem, and her name is Ariana Grande, but that's beside the point.
I love Cynthia Erivo. So if there's at least something we can take with that,
honestly, perfect casting there.
I agree.
The Grande casting is one of the worst decisions.
It's a little questionable.
It's bad. It's bad for society, and I don't like it. I have to watch that movie, and I'm not looking forward to it. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find, like Brendan said, all my work at awardswatch.com. If you like podcasts like this one, we have the Awards Watch podcast, released that every Monday, every Thursday. Jay Ledbetter and myself, we do Director Watch. We're in the middle of a Tony Scott movie series right now, so go and listen to that. And yeah, Brendan, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, man.
I hope I filled JD's shoes proudly. This feels like old times, kind of doing it like that.
This is like riding a bike, talking with you. You never forget.
Well, yeah, that is true. And like a bike, we're actually going into a tornado right now. It's only going to work for the podcast audience, but for visually, you literally got to see me kind of go like this. So
it's so convincing. It's so convincing.
You got to listen to both now. So
the visuals and Twisters were certainly an improvement. I'll say.
Yeah, but anyway, I'll be back for Wicked. Can't wait to defy gravity with that one.
Yeah, and for those of you listening, be sure to check out everything that Awards Watch is doing. I love the director series that you and Jay are doing, and I won't say what it is, but your next upcoming director series after Tony Scott. Can't wait to hear what that is. A little inside baseball between us. It's going to be exciting. So be sure that you're all listening and you're all checking out that. And I believe that is it for this episode. Be sure to review, or as I was saying, it should be it. But be sure to check out our review of Dandelion that JD and I just did. Some pretty good stuff there. Actually, it's
good?
Charming. I liked it quite a bit. It's not great. The script has a few blemishes, but I was able to overlook some of them given my own, I guess, connectivity to the music side of that.
The music guy.
It gets a particular thing very right about it. It really does depict the struggle of what it means to try and make it in that world. I think more so than maybe some of its other counterparts. And I think that ultimately saves it. Very good movie, really great review that JD and I had. Be sure to check that out. And also be sure to check out episode 594, where JD and I did a little 2024 catch up, talking about some of the year's smaller films that we didn't give official reviews for. Some of them I think are worth checking out. So be sure to look out for that. Ryan, any final thoughts as we conclude this conversation?
Man, final thoughts. Well, I've been watching a lot of great movies.
Yeah, you've been watching a lot of older movies, and it's honestly spoiling your thoughts on the new stuff.
It's really, I gotta say this. I've had a really rough year with 2024. One, because I thought last year was incredible.
Good year.
It was a really strong year. I mean, Brendan, it broke my rule last year multiple times.
You did the 5 stars.
I got the 5 stars 5 times last year. So,
what is your favorite film of the decade thus far? Is it Oppenheimer?
It is Oppenheimer. That's
okay.
Yeah. But it's close, followed by Tar. Tar's right there with me.
That's a good choice.
It's the 1-2 punch of people with moral scruples. But I don't know. I'm starting to think about a lot about the end of the decade or the midway point of the decade, and that I mean, this year has one entry in the best of the decade so far, and that's it. And that would be Luca Guadagnino's Challengers, and that's no movie has hit 4.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd for me so far this year.
Yeah, neither for me. The closest would be Furiosa. That one I want to rewatch again to see if I feel tempted to raise that up to 4.5 for me.
That was there in the first watch, and then the second watch it moved down just a little bit to 4, and so I don't know. I mean, like I'm looking for some great movies. I hope that there's a bunch of great stuff out there. I'll be at the festivals. And I mean, obviously the fall is always backloaded, but I gotta say, I'm as much as I dog on Ridley all the time, I'm a sucker for Denzel and swords and sandals and Paul Mescal in the Coliseum right now. Like that's
yeah.
all I can think about. And it's probably not good for my marriage, but it is what
who
it
cares?
is.
I'm looking forward to this director's cut of Napoleon, honestly. I think there's a great movie in there. I'm genuinely curious about that.
This is the problem with Ridley. It's like you can't release this movie and I hate it. And I did not like Napoleon at all. It was like
Right.
I wanted it to be very actually a lot more sillier than it was. And so I'm hoping that in that cut there's a little bit more of that humor that was kind of in there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
You think you're special because you have boats.
Man, that the pork chop thing or whatever it was.
Destiny has brought me this lamb chop.
Lamb chop. It's
yeah.
that,
or the way he like sexually taunts Vanessa Kirby with his like like his mumbling is it's amazing stuff.
I still think Kirby is totally miscast in that, and it should have been Jodie Comer. But that's just
well, I mean, I'm at a point now where I think The Last Duel might be Ridley Scott's best historical epic.
That movie is great.
I underrated that when I first saw it. I think that is a genuinely great movie.
That movie is so complex and interesting, and what a that's why I gave it adapted screenplay that year. Adapted screenplay that year. What a writing exercise for 3 writers.
So interesting. Such an interesting idea.
So interesting.
Because we've seen that Rashomon effect thing before in many movies, but never taken so literally from a meta standpoint behind the camera. Like that is a really interesting approach.
But last thing, Brendan. I know that all the listeners out here will know this. Go back and listen to the movie series that Brendan and JD did on Michael Mann. Because I've been going back and listen to those episodes because I've been watching Man, and y'all did a great job minus one episode on that series. And I'm not going to say anything else other than that. But the movies of Michael Mann, an absolutely just great, joyous, honestly,
great director.
They're just great movies, and they're very comforting. Weirdly, they're very comforting.
They get better with time. He is like the one filmmaker that is basically designed to get better with time.
Yeah, I think in a couple of years, people will realize Ferrari's a masterpiece.
I think so. I'm not there myself, but I wouldn't be surprised if I see that narrative starting maybe in 10 years, as you're saying.
We're in the Miami Vice assance right now.
Oh yeah, that went nuts.
We're in the Miami Vice. I mean, I'm assuming we've had the kind of look back at Black Hat too since the 4 case come out. So I'm waiting for those Public Enemy Defenders to start coming out because I feel like they're next.
That's an interesting movie. I'm not sold on Public Enemies, but I think it's a very interesting movie and has some really interesting things in it. But anyway, Michael Mann, The Manhole, really good film.
Manhole, gotta go down it.
Yeah. Really appreciate being here, Ryan. As far as final thoughts from me, just as a few reminders here, there will be no main show this weekend as JD is off sailing the seas with his family as we speak.
Jack Sparrow?
Yeah, he's being a pirate. That's absolutely what he's doing. Listening to Hans Zimmer and just being a weirdo on a boat. What a score. Even though there will be no main show, we are still planning to release a new Women in Session episode, which will be really exciting. Be sure to check that out. And there will also be a review of the movie The Beast from earlier this year. So be sure to look out for that. Really fascinating movie. And I am curious to see what people think of it as they get a chance to see it.
Got to catch up with it. Haven't seen
it. I'd be curious to get your thoughts as well, Ryan, for sure. But anyway, thank you, Ryan, for being here once again. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will see y'all next time on the In Session Film Podcast.